Right now on Upfront.
House chaos.
I think we're a conservative center-right party. I think I'm the guy who can help unite that.
Republicans returning to Washington. The battle to elect a new speaker. Kevin McCarthy ousted. The House at a standstill. Wisconsin Republicans reacting.
Is these people who kicked out Kevin don't have a plan B.
The only word I can describe for that is he's either a fool or a liar.
This Sunday, Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany, Democrat Mark Pocan on the week ahead. Push to impeach.
And there's no need to do an impeachment because she's not there lawfully.
Assembly Speaker Robin Vos rejecting Senate President Chris Kapika's request to start impeachment proceedings against the state's top election chief, and now he's here to respond. Plus, the latest on the incident involving a man with an assault rifle at the Capitol looking for the governor.
Anytime something like this happens, obviously they reevaluate.
And Bucks Business, the team owners one-on-one, the new season, the new ownership group, and Wisconsin taxpayers funding professional sports as the Brewers bill goes public.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. A busy week ahead from Wisconsin to Washington, so let's get to it. Negotiations surrounding the Brewers funding bill intensifying, and more changes coming after that public hearing Thursday. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos says he'll hold off, at least for now, on impeachment proceedings against the state's top election official, and a Madison man under arrest demanding to see Governor Tony Evers at the Capitol, first outside his office open carrying a handgun, then bailing out of jail and returning hours later with an assault rifle. A lot to get to. Let's bring in Senate President Republican Chris Kapika. Senator, welcome back to the show.
Good to see you. Good to be here. Thanks.
Let's start with that incident involving the governor this past week. Any immediate security changes at the Capitol that you anticipate?
We've been looking at additional security measures in the Senate for sure. So I was briefed on it yesterday, just kind of the background. We're very concerned about it. It's a very credible threat. One of the officers said it's probably one of the most concerning things that he's seen. So we definitely are looking at options and, hey, how do we make sure the building is safe, but also the members in the Senate are safe, and obviously the Assembly. So we're definitely looking at measures to make sure we're reacting appropriately. And we're one of the few capitals in the United States who do not have security measures in place right now. So it's a conversation we have to have.
Give me some examples. Does that include metal detectors, or what are you considering?
Well, the new technology out there, if you look at like the UW system, has some systems that actually it's not just metal detectors. They detect weapons as you walk through. So there's algorithms. It gets a little complex, but algorithms that will recognize weapons and alert someone that, hey, there may be a possible weapon in here or something like that. So those are all the things we're looking at just to make sure, again, as Senate President, my job is to make sure the floor is safe because I preside over it and I want to make sure I do my job.
Right now, concealed carry is allowed for people who have permits in the Capitol, in the galleries. Are you looking at changing that?
Actually, concealed carry is not allowed in the
gallery.
Correct. The gallery right now, the rules state there are no weapons allowed in the gallery.
Inside the Capitol, then?
Correct.
Would you like to see that change?
It's, if you look at the statistics, conceal carry, people who are legally carrying are not the problem. And if you look at the specific situation as we're reading through the details, this gentleman who had the weapons was not supposed to have those weapons according to law. So there's not discussion around are we going to adjust conceal carry. There's discussion around in today's society as things continue to get crazier, how are we going to make sure that we're protecting the members of the legislature specifically, which is my responsibility.
Let's move to impeachment. This past week, you wrote a letter to Speaker Vos asking him to begin impeachment proceedings against Wisconsin Election Commissioner Administrator Megan Wolf. The Senate earlier essentially voted to fire her in their vote. Attorney General Josh Kaul then sued, saying that vote was illegal, looking to keep her in her post. Speaker Vos, just on Capitol City Sunday, responded to your request. Let's take a listen.
Well, again, there's no need to do an impeachment because she's not there lawfully. I think we need to go through the existing process and not just be frustrated by the fact that the Senate's actions haven't seemed to work at this point. We need to follow the law and see what the actual rulings are from the court.
Seems like Speaker Vos wants to wait until the court action is done. Your response to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, my concern is this. We continue to have a hyper-political head of our elections. When we designed this whole system, the whole process, if you look at other states that we copied, there's never been this controversy over the head of elections. And we'll know we're successful when nobody knows the name of the head election official. And right now, Megan Wolf's name is a lightning rod. That's not good for anybody. If the state is going to move on and get past this whole past election, we have to have somebody who everybody trusts. So my goal is to say, let's move into that direction so we can just get past this and start coming back together as a society, because it's so divisive. The second thing is, my job as Senate President is to make sure that I'm looking out for the integrity of the Senate. The Senate has taken actions, and if you look at the letter to Speaker Voss, I laid out, hey, we followed all the rules, the procedures, and now we're to the point where, you know, a very political Attorney General is taking action on her behalf, and that political action is just furthering the problem of the legislature in our authority being pushed to the side, and I can't allow that. So there's a couple reasons behind why I did what I did.
If the judge does rule and says that vote was illegal and she should stay in her spot, is that it? Will you move on?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that because I'm actually part of that lawsuit. But my point is, we have to take action.
It seems like Speaker Voss is pouring cold water on that, at least at the moment.
Well, I just put this in front of him this week. I've been processing this for probably a couple of months now, just looking at it and saying, hey, what actions do I need to take to make sure that the integrity of this legislature is upheld? So I just put that in front of him. So I think it's very wise of him to step back and not knee-jerk react. He needs to look at what I laid out and decide if, hey, this raises to the cause of misconduct, which in my book, disregarding the authority of the Senate is misconduct. So that's what I'm hoping he'll get to.
The Assembly passed new maps legislation that would create new maps ahead of 2024. Is the Senate going to take up that bill?
I don't know. We're looking at that right now. We're having those discussions internally to determine, hey, is this direction the direction we want to go? And there are two sides to it on, hey, this is an action we could take, and it could possibly make the process better. The other side of that discussion is we have passed maps. The Supreme Court of the United States has said, hey, they follow the procedure. And so that's the debate that's going on right now, and we just have to figure out what is the best course of action. There are not the votes in the Senate right now to pass that legislation.
There's not enough votes in the caucus at this moment to pass it.
At this point, no.
The Brewers had a public hearing this past week. This is going to first go to the Assembly before it comes over to the Senate. Where is the Republican caucus in the Senate on this? There's changes and negotiations happening as we sit here today.
Yeah, we're still negotiating that. I think the sense is most people want to make sure the Brewers stay. So the discussion right now is there's some agreements or proposals that are in front of us. My concern with the current proposal is there is still too much taxpayer money going into, when you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, I'm not comfortable with that. But I think there's a point where if we put some kind of a ticket tax in place and say, hey, let's have the people who are going and using the facility pay for their use of the facility. I think there's getting some traction there. I think if we get down that road, we might be able to come to an agreement fairly soon.
Ticket tax on non-game events.
Non-game events or game events, that's the discussion right now. We don't know what that's going to look like.
You would like game events as well.
I would actually, my personal preference, this is not the position of the caucus, is that I think every ticket, because anybody walking in there is using the facility, I'd like to see a ticket tax, whether it could be a very small one, but as you look at 28,000 people every game that are rolling through there, that little bit can help make up the difference between where we're at now and where I think we need to be.
Busy few weeks ahead. Senate President Chris Kappas. Senator, like always, thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Up next, the Bucks owners one-on-one.
And so it was either build a new arena or the NBA was going to make us move the team.
Our rare interview, the new ownership group, their thoughts on taxpayer dollars. But first, a wild week ahead in Washington. The battle to become the next House Speaker. Congressman Tom Tiffany and Mark Pocan both standing by next.